All right, welcome to EdFlix and Chill. We're going to be having some fun where we're going to compare classroom management with Netflix a little bit and kind of go over some different ways that you can improve or different strategies you can use in your classroom to help with that classroom management and to kind of make things easier for you. So I'm Stephanie Howe. I am an instructional technology coach in our district. We're from Pickerington, Ohio, and I help with students using different technology. Where Tara, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? And you're muted. Um,
There we go. All right. Sorry. I am actually a behavior coach in the district and I work in 14 of our schools. I have 7 elementaries, 3 middle schools, 2 junior highs, and 2 high schools that I support. I support tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 behaviors. I support PBIS teams. I do some training for admin. So I'm kind of all things behavior, from anywhere from our classroom management and our students that are every day, or our most significant students.
right, and thank you to those that let us know where you're teaching and what you teach. It will just kind of help us, again, kind of cater the learning towards you. So please use that chat box so that way we can kind of cater and customize this session for exactly what you need for your classroom. Right, and so resources. So if you would like access to the slide deck, I'm going to throw in a Google form, and you just need to fill it out. You'll just put your name, your district, and then for the session title, you'll just add our session title for today. So again, right there is the Google form. Once you click that, it's just going to look something like that. Just add your email, your name, your district, and then the session title. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste the session title right into the chat as well if you want to copy and paste that over. And then after the session, we will send over the session deck and resources along with, if you have any questions or need anything, you can email us back and ask for whatever you might need.
And there are tons and tons of resources. We will not go over every single one because we could be here for a very long time if we did that. We are very much what we would consider oversharers. So if you are interested in having the slide deck with all of the resources that are linked in, you can always shoot us an email if you have any questions about any of the resources that we didn't get to talk about. But there are plenty of resources here. Hopefully our goal is today that you are able to take at least one away that would help you in your classrooms.
Yeah, and it is recorded, so you can always come back to the recording when you're like, okay, I did that one thing and it worked and it went really well. I'm ready for more. And so we will also send out that recording with those resources for the slides as well. Okay, so when you are first logging into Netflix, right, Tara, what do you kind of notice right away when you log into Netflix? Oh, you're muted again.
It's all laid out for us. We have very specific categorizing, whether it be your movies, your search bar, all the things that you have available that makes it really easy to navigate.
Yeah, so in the chat, let us know what do you notice right when you click maybe Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, any of those streaming services. Again, I know when I log in, I automatically go to like either the continue watching. So if I am watching a TV show and I just finished one and I just went there right away, right? Yeah, it's curated for you. It tells you this is percentage that is matched with you, your top 10. Personal profile. Yeah, I love that, Victoria, because when I log in, it's personalized to me and it's not my husband's list, which would probably drive me crazy because we have two different TV styles. Or my sons, I'm not logging in and I'm not seeing kid shows, right? I'm seeing exactly what's trending. I'm seeing what's kind of more personalized for me. And so when you think about your classroom, that's the first thing you kind of want to reflect on and think about is, are things for your students, are they accessible? Are they able to kind of find what is in your classroom, and are they able to get different supplies if they need to? Are those supplies labeled? Just kind of like Netflix is.
Is the operation of it, does it have a good flow? Is it suitable to your needs when you do a project or an activity? How does that flow look like so that you create that continuity and continuum so that you don't have students that are asking questions? Or is the seating arrangement, do you have kids that are in the seating arrangement that maybe need to be moved or changed because they struggle with another student, or they need preferential seating, or they don't have some of the organization skills, or need or have different needs, and the layout needs to be different for those kiddos.
Yeah, and something that I've been thinking about too is if you work with younger students. So, for example, my son is 3. He loves coming into my office because I'm on maternity leave right now. And so I'm home more and I work in my home office a lot more compared to when I'm at school. And I had to reorganize my office closet because I had supplies that I didn't want him getting into. And I had to raise them up a couple things. So he wasn't able to get into those. So even those that we don't want our students to maybe get into, are those put away, and are those kind of away from them so where they can't reach and get those different supplies either. So when we are thinking about seating, here is kind of an example seating chart where you might have the door, the board. Some teachers might use flexible seating, but again, is everything easy to get to? If you want collaborative groups, are students able to work with those collaborative groups? If they're doing some think, pair, share activities, are they easy and able to do that? And what I love about this strategy is you can kind of see these different numbers here. So it says like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see all those different numbers. And what that can help you with is you could have all of your students and you can kind of assign them maybe a number or a letter and kind of help your seating arrangement as well. So where it says ones, that might be my student that is like always on top of things, is very well behaved, where my 5 might be that student that might be more disruptive and might need a little bit more support. And so then I just number every single student in between. And then I'm able to kind of place like all of those different numbers in a certain area for my seating chart. And you can kind of see where I do put those students with higher needs at. So then I can go over and I can support their needs as well. So that could be one way that you might kind of organize your seating arrangements. But another thing that we want you to think about is executive functioning. And so when it comes to executive functioning, do students have the skills to be independently successful in your classroom?
And executive functioning has so many pieces and parts to it. When we start talking about executive functioning, these are many skills that we have here. What is their response inhibition, their working memory, their emotional control? A lot of our students, we think about executive functioning as more of a ADHD type thing, but really this is skills that none of us are born with. All of these skills are skills we have to learn. I've like to think of this as executive functioning skills. We sometimes feel like our common sense, but common sense isn't really common to everyone. So we have to teach common sense. If that makes sense, right? I said sense a lot of times, but a lot of these things are things that we have to teach, and every student is on a different level. Just for example, like in my household, um, I have one son that's very organized and one son that's not. And it really stemmed from my stepson that it was him and my husband for several years together. He never required him to have any type of organization. My husband just went ahead and did it for him. Where I had my two kids as a single mom, and I couldn't do all of that with like they I couldn't do all of that for them. So I had to teach them those skills to be independent. So you have kids that are coming from different backgrounds coming in and having different skills. So this is where we try to identify that pre-assessment. What skills are those students in need of so that we are kind of aware what ways that we can support the student. And Steph added up here, this is a way that we kind of like to get started. So think about that one student in your class. Think about that student and drop something in the chat if you can relate and have a student with one of these or multiple of these descriptors.
So what's that one student that drives you maybe crazy in your classroom? Are they lazy? Maybe that's stubborn, messy, disruptive, I can't speak today. Yeah. Unmotivated, forgetful. So what is that word that might describe one of those students that might be driving you crazy maybe this past week? Yeah, unmotivated. That's a good one. Yeah.
So when we start to think about these and we start to think about these adjectives, these descriptors of students, then we start to talk about, okay, once we have identified, that's our starting point. Once we've identified some of these things, then we start to realize in a quick informal assessment what their needs are. So if they are lazy, then they need support in sustained attention and goal-directed persistence. Maybe messy, they need organization, disruptive, emotional control, and response inhibition. So we start to think about that one student or those couple students that are in our class that kind of throw us off. Then we start to change from using that descriptor, because we know we don't want to use that descriptor, but it's that whole mindset of taking that descriptor and knowing that it does not have to be like that. We can change those things by teaching them those skills. We don't want that student to be always known as unmotivated, right? We want to change that mindset of the student's not unmotivated. They need support in time management, task initiation, and planning and prioritization. And how can we teach those skills to that student? So we start in that one place of what is that descriptor, but then taking that mindset and changing it to this is not how we always want to see this student. We don't want this adjective or descriptor to follow that student. So let's flip it around and make it so that these are the skills we work on with that student to support them in the classroom daily.
Yeah, and so what we started to do is we started to kind of create different hubs because, again, we wanted to personalize these different resources for teachers. And so if teachers had that unmotivated student, they were able to go here and then they could go to time management resources and explore more to support that student and to teach them those different skills in order to help them. So right here on this kind of the front page of the hub, you would just click the skill that was missing. And then again, there's different strategies. There's a quick overview, and then there's different resources that could help that student to use different strategies that I might use in my teaching, or to start to give them those strategies so they can independently become stronger, because these are skills that they're going to need when they leave school as well.
So when we go back to that EdFlix, right? And we start talking about what does that layout look like, and that EdFlix is kind of a hub. That is our hub for executive functioning. Everything is laid out in there, from strategies to support our kids to resources, and there's also some video links and how to use those resources and when you can use those resources for those different skills that we recognize that some of our kids need to be taught, or how can we get those skills like in where we either teach them in isolation or we teach them throughout our lesson in different ways and provide those skill that student those skills. So there's a lot here. There's a lot of resources, a ton of stuff for executive functioning. But if you think about the overall flow of your classroom, it's some of the executive functioning skills that might prevent that flow of the classroom, or station rotation if they're not organized. And it could be not just organization within their backpacks or their folders. It's that digital organization. If I'm doing station to station, and I only have 3 minutes, am I able to go into my Google Drive or whatever learning management system I use? Am I able to access those digital things quickly when I have 3 minutes in between stations? So there's many different levels and different pieces and parts to executive functioning that if you that can help the flow of your classroom, and help that smooth transition for our kiddos.
Yeah, and so again, you can do that quick kind of one word descriptor that kind of describes that student, or you could use one of these different pre-assessments that have already been made, and there's the directions in this resource as well, where the students take this quick test, and after they take this test, they get their score on executive functioning. And so then they can see where they are struggling and which areas are their strengths. And then you're able to take that information and put it into different categories of executive functioning. And then you are able to kind of use those resources and go, okay, majority of my class needs help with organization based on our results from this test. And so then I can go to the organization tab, see what is there to help my students, and begin to use some of that in my instruction, or I can use that in maybe my learning management system. So if I use Google Classroom, I can kind of set it up and organize it a little bit better so that students can find things as well. We also struggle as adults. So feel free to take this Google Form survey, and you can kind of see where do I kind of struggle and what skills do I need to maybe work on, because maybe you might have the messiest desk, and that's an area you need to work on as an adult too. But the good thing is we can put different systems or different things into place to overcome these weaknesses that we might have. All right. And so we are going to go ahead and we're going to now talk about the next area, which is procedures. So when you think about your classroom, I just want you to kind of take a moment to reflect. And what do you maybe not have a procedure for? Maybe it's group work that your students are kind of arguing back and forth. There's no really procedure there for your students. Maybe it's your seating chart. It's just kind of crazy. Maybe it's between bells. It's your students are not transitioning well. It takes 10 minutes to get started. There's lots of talking, or the students aren't ready to even begin your class. Maybe it's something with reflection of students' different behaviors, and you're not really able to talk with them about those different behaviors. You're just kind of giving consequences, or you're punishing, and you're not really having them reflect on those. Maybe it's your start of class where students come in and they get started, but it's just not flowing very well. Or maybe it's the end of class. The bell rings and it's just crazy. It's chaotic. Maybe if a student finishes early, they don't know what to do, that digital space. So I want you to kind of look at this list and think about your own classroom. Okay, where are there maybe a weakness? where you might not have that procedure right into play and your students are maybe struggling, or maybe you're like, this is the worst time of the school day. I know for me, it was when maybe students were stuck. Like that was a struggle for me because I was trying to help this group of students, but then there was all these other students who were trying to get help because they were stuck or they were misbehaving because they were stuck. And it was something that I needed to figure out for my own classroom to make that flow a lot better. So again, go ahead and kind of think. Feel free to share in the chat. Tara, what area do you maybe want to cover for this activity?
I was going to agree with when you're stuck. A lot of times when we're stuck, our simple go-to is early finishers. That's another one as well. When you're stuck, I know in my classroom I never had a procedure for that, so it was constantly coming up to me and asking me questions, and or I would be in the middle of a small group lesson if I had station rotation going on, and that student would get up from their station and come to mine. So there was a lot going on if I was working one on one or a small group and someone had a question. So there was interruption. So I think when you're stuck was a good one for me that I needed. That was a procedure that I had to reevaluate and put into place and practice, because then it was also creating those independent learners, which was not happening in my classroom. And I really had to reflect on what that looked like and how to support kids. So it wasn't always teacher directed. And we started growing that independence in the classroom when when one of my kids would get stuck on something.
Yeah, so just a reminder that just like Netflix, you might not watch all the movies on Netflix. And the same with procedures. You might already have something that's already in place that's working really well. And so you could skip that video or that activity and kind of focus on the ones that you do need more assistance with. So that's how you're going to use this resource pack, is when you are kind of struggling, or you're like, oh my gosh, these finishers that are finishing early are driving me crazy because I don't have anything ready for them. Or I thought it would take longer than it actually did, or they didn't do their work completely. You're able to kind of then look at this resource pack and kind of start to dig in and change and update your classroom procedure. So we're going to go ahead and start with your stuck, but let us know.
How about, Steph, let's do early finishers. Somebody dropped early finishers in the chat.
Yeah, so if you want to see another one during this kind of live demo, again, everything has a video with it. But if you want to see another one, drop it into the chat because we'll probably have time to do 2 or 3. So again, we would love to customize it for what you guys need. So earlier finishers, you'll just click and then it opens up the resource. There's a quick video that kind of walks you through it. And then there's just questions that we want you to reflect about, because again, everybody's classroom is a little bit different. And so we want you to think about, if students finish early, what can they work on? So what maybe make a list of different things that your students can work on if they do finish early. Do I want my students to go deeper into this topic? Do you want them to review something from a different topic? Or do you want them to work on something completely different? Do you want to maybe prepare different like levels in your classroom? So it's kind of game-based where students can explore different activities. And they might do like, okay, now that I've finished level 3, I'm going to go on to level 4. Should your students move on to some type of homework? Maybe you give homework or maybe you don't. And what happens if they complete that early as well? Should students have maybe like a rubric or self-evaluate their work? So if they do finish, is there some type of rubric that they can look over or self-evaluation? And then maybe you have classroom jobs. Okay, so again, when you're kind of getting into these resources, there's going to be a quick thing, like just a quick reflection, what you want to kind of think about. And then on the next slide, there's going to be resources for you.
I think that question piece is huge, right? And each one of these resources have questions to think about, because knowing the goal of what you want to happen during that time. So if I know that I want them to go deeper into a topic, then when I go to my next slide, I can look at some of those resources that might be available for going deeper into a topic. If I know it's really about behavior management, that might make it a little bit different. So, reflecting on those questions, what is the goal of that time? Then can help you do the resources. So there'll always be in all of these resources questions to think about. That way that can lead you to the resources that might be most effective in your classroom. And then once you have those resources, then you can start teaching that piece.
Yeah, and sometimes you might even invite someone in to come observe and just say, hey, I'm looking for feedback. I'm not sure which procedure I might be lacking. If you're kind of like, I'm not sure what's going on. Invite maybe an instructional coach or a principal or another colleague in during their planning time and just ask them to kind of observe and help kind of figure out which might be lacking.
And I just happened to have that this week. I had somebody ask me to come observe. They were struggling with some classroom management, and I went into the class, and really where they were losing the kids was during that transition time. And we looked at what they did for transition. We didn't have any timers. We didn't have any we only had verbal instructions. So we added some transition timers. We added some goals for the students practicing. We reviewed some of those transition, what it looks like to transition. We also put some visual directions up on the board during that transition time and set some expectations up and practice those transitions as well. So when you get to that finishing early, okay, practicing that and, doing it with them, okay, providing those options, and going with that gradual release until they gradually know, okay, this is the procedure. And then they have that smooth running of every time we finish early. I know exactly the expectation, and I don't even have to ask the teacher what Mrs. Ruckman, what do I do next? Right? Because they just have had that practice of routine, what they do next, because we've practiced it, we've talked about it, we've taught it, and now they know I finished early. I don't even have to ask Miss Ruckman what comes next because I know where to go and what to do.
Yeah, and so you might kind of change the way that your whole classroom looks like. So maybe you start to do some blended learning activities where you might have different stations for your students to go through. Maybe you use like a roadmap. So a roadmap is where students travel between different activities. So you can kind of see here, they're kind of laid out like a game board, and the students go among these different activities to complete their learning. Or you might even say, okay, I'm going to keep my instruction exactly the way it is, and I'm just going to create different choice boards. So maybe if they finish early, there's a list of these websites where you could create your own choice board. This, to be honest, is probably going to be way too overwhelming for your students. So you as a teacher, instead of having all of these different choices, probably want to create your own choice board of about 6 different activities for the students to choose from. Because I feel like if you give some students this list, they might not do any of them because they're just like, I don't even know what to do. This is more for you, like a resource bank, and then you want to take these links and kind of create your own choice board. You might do some task cards for students or other choice boards or extension hubs. This is a really nice hub where students can work on different extension type of activities to grow in their knowledge. And then
That's one of my favorite hubs, by the way. I love that hub.
You could also do some brain breaks. So if you wanted to do some type of brain break where maybe they do puzzles or movement or mindfulness, that could be some options as well. You can also have students kind of work on like a checklist. So once you have all your activities laid out, they might check off as they do different things. Some teachers create like a choice board for the month, and they change them up every month, and then the students just pick different activities whenever they finish early. So lots of different ways that you could kind of develop and create your own early finish thing. But again, You might also have a checklist, because I know for sometimes for my early finishers, they weren't really done. So you might even say, like, have you cleaned up your area? Did you put away your materials? Did you complete all your work? And sometimes with that work, I might have like a checklist of what was expected. Like, did you do each of these parts? And then I might just say, like, is there anything else you need to finish? And then they pick an activity. So again, that could be another way that you make sure that they did everything for them. But you can kind of see here that some teachers might use like a flow chart to kind of walk students through if they are really finished. And then if they're not, they go back, or yes, they do, they can work on something. And then I've also had teachers kind of list out different steps to make sure that students have finished. But it's kind of think about your procedure and what you want your students to do.
Tons of good stuff on early finishing theirs, and each one of these standing operating procedures is aligned just like this with the resources, the questions to ask, and a video to talk about what those resources look like.
And so when you're teaching these different procedures, you want to model it, you want to practice it together with your students, and then you want them to do it. So you want to see them do it. So don't forget that you want to teach them these different procedures as well, and not just say, okay, now that you're done, that we gave you a choice board. You want to go over that choice board with them and maybe walk through it the first time that they have it. Because if you don't teach it, then they don't maybe know what to do. Right. And so then that brings us to our last search, which is motivation. And so when we're thinking about different ways to motivate our students, there's a couple different resources here. You could give them a formative kind of assessment to see what motivates students. You could play games. And so now we're going to go over those different ways to just kind of keep our students motivated and excited to learn. And a lot of times we use different games to help with that. We use different reward systems and different things like that. So let's go ahead and let's start with the forced choice survey. So when you are setting up this forced choice survey, it has kind of different ways for students to be rewarded. And so when students are getting rewarded, I often share this story where during summer school, I just assumed that all my students would want a Jolly Rancher, right? And a lot of teachers, I think, kind of sometimes assume that, right? Like we're just like, okay, they'll work for candy, which a lot of kids will, right? But that wasn't driving deeper into what really motivated that group of students. And so when I did this assessment, so this survey is a Google Sheet, and when you make a copy of it, it will walk you through how to set it up throughout the video. And once the students take the survey, it's kind of like a would you rather type of test. Would you rather have chips, or would you rather kind of have 100 on your piece of paper? Okay. So when students are doing this test at the very end, they are going to get a result for what kind of motivates them. And so when I am looking over these results, again, it's going to come up in a spreadsheet that looks something like this. But again, your students will just use a Google form. And they answer all of these different questions. So there's that bag of chips. Which one would you pick? Be free to do what you like, or teacher writes 100 on your paper. And then the students, after they answer these different questions, they get a nice little graph with their score on it. And then you're able to use this data to know, okay, this is how I am motivated. This student is independent rewards, or maybe it's adult approval. And so my summer school students, they were mostly adult approval. And so what I realized is I needed to give different feedback. Yeah, they appreciated those Jolly Ranchers, but I needed to give praise and provide detailed positive feedback to them. I also might needed to sit next to them or do a TikTok dance with them. But there was all these different things that I should have been doing to kind of fill their cup rather than just giving them those Jolly Ranchers.
And thinking, I know somebody had dropped in the chat attention seeking, and that would kind of align with that. So are we, um, if we know a student is attention seeking, but yet we're motivating them, like Steph said with her Jolly Rancher example, but we're trying to motivate them with a Jolly Rancher, then that's not really motivating to them. What is motivating to them is that attention. So providing them the attention in different ways, non-contingently or just based on nothing at all, right? We just are giving them a high five, making a shake up, but providing them that attention in other ways. If anyone has anyone ever seen the five love languages? Um, it's very business related, it's adult related, but it all aligns to this as well. You know, if we make those students feel psychologically safe and we're meeting their needs in other ways, or we're motivating them by based on what their need is, not based on it's more individual. Like for me, I'm not very motivated by, a peer reward. I'm automatic motivated. Acts of service are what motivates me. I like to help people. So, is it a student that likes to be a helper in your classroom? And is there opportunity for those students to help? I was in a meeting today about a student that's very motivated by being able to help. So he takes notes throughout and he helps the teacher, sits next to the teacher and writes down guided notes. And then we make copies of his notes to share with some of the kids that might have an accommodation in the classroom. And he is motivated by that act of service of helping his friends in the classroom that might have different needs for taking notes. So using those assessments, that forced choice piece to find out what motivates our kid might help with the unmotivated. So we're providing those opportunities. A lot of our kids that are unmotivated, and I'm going to kind of make a blanket statement, but there's much more to it, much more behind it. But many of our kids that are unmotivated are kids that have experienced lack of success in the past. So finding ways that they are feeling success and that we provide some type of positive reinforcement. And I know there are plenty of teachers out there like, well, I'm not going to incentivize everything. I'm not going to like I can't do that. But think about it. Would you come to work every day if you didn't get paid? Probably not. We do live in a token economy, so we don't really think of the rewards. We think of it as part of it is a reward, right? But it is part of motivate it's part of motivation as well. It's part of that positive incentive and how you also shape behaviors if you have a student that's struggling, or even just our tier 1 kiddos that don't really have classroom disruption issues, or maybe they're just off task a little bit. So providing that motivation and teaching that piece and helping them shape some of that behavior through that positive incentive.
And so then kind of when you know how students are motivated, you can again use that to kind of help, which is then going to kind of lead to our next piece, which is our work and reset. So this is a really great strategy to use with students when you are just trying to get more instructional time out of them. So what you'll do is you kind of create at least 2 success criteria. You don't want any more than probably 5. That kind of becomes too much, even probably 4. So about 2 to 3. And for this class, their focus was to raise their hand when they spoke because they were just speaking out and they were speaking over other students. And their other goal was to stay in their space because this class was just getting up and moving around. And so what we did is they had these 2 goals and they were able to get 1 warning. Now, eventually this warning goes away, but for right now is their first time doing it. So we gave them some grace and they got 1 warning. We set the timer for 20 minutes. So right here, we just set the timer and they were to work for 20 minutes straight. And what would happen if students were raising their hand to speak and staying in the space? We gave them that positive reinforcement. If they were not, we just kind of went over and redirected them or kind of had a quick chat with them or just said, hey, your warning, right? Or we said, okay, we're going to write your name down now. And what happened after the 20 minutes is students got to choose for 5 minutes one of these rewards. So once we were using that survey results, we try to pick different things like talk with a friend or tech time or stretch and move or draw based on that class and what they kind of wanted. Also, we had some of the students brainstorm with us different rewards. And those students that met the 20 minutes and they were doing exactly what they were supposed to got a 5-minute break using any of these different activities on this choice board. There were 2 students that did not. They got more than one warning. And so they had to come sit with me at a small desk and we had a quick reflection time. And so we talked about what was a challenge during the work time. And we kind of worked together to reflect. What went well during that work time? What would you change and how can I maybe help you? What can you try next time to meet your goal? And so after those 5 minutes, and then the students returned back to their seat within like 30 seconds, we restarted the timer for another 20 minutes. And those students that were with me that first time were not with me that second time because they wanted to be back with their peers in earning that reward. So I had 0 students, all students 100% met those 2 behavior goals based on this model. And I was able to get a lot more instructional time out of them rather than redirecting the entire 20 minutes that I typically would have taught.
And I have used this in kindergarten, second grade. I've used it in junior high and I used it in high school. And all of those expectations or success criteria changes based on the level you were in. When I used it with high school students, it was the success criteria. What we used one, and it was to put your phone away and not touch your phone for 25 minutes. We used a 25-minute timer versus a 20-minute timer. If you've ever heard of the Pomodoro technique, this is kind of in line with the Pomodoro technique. So besides helping to manage behaviors, it also is helping students develop that time management and think about how to be productive and how to stay focused for that specific amount of time. It's also good to support management of ADHD symptoms because it helps students like set up that amount of time to better concentrate and complete the tasks with reduced distractions within that time period, and then allows them to have that break that they need to be able to get refocused to come back and do it again. I did this in a high school classroom for a week, and the teacher was absolutely like, I have so much to cover that I don't have time to give a break for 25 minutes or give a break for 5 minutes for every 25 minutes of work. I have 1 hour. That would mean I'd give them a 10-minute break in that 1 hour period. And the answer was yes. Yes, that's what we're going to do. It's designed to help like improve that concentration and reduce distractions. But it increases productivity. And when we took some baseline data for this and using this work and reset, we call it, but it also is like that, like I said, that mimic of the Pomodoro technique. When we did it, they actually overall gained 12 minutes of instructional time when we took the baseline data to when we gave the breaks a week. And if you really think about that, 12 minutes of instructional time a gain per week, you have 4 weeks, right? You're looking at, you actually gained 50 minutes of instructional time because that teacher didn't have the repeated corrections and redirections throughout the classroom. time, and it really improved that focus. So what they thought was going to reduce the amount of instructional time they had actually increased the amount of instructional time because of that focus of the students and allowing them to have those breaks. But which was a very much a surprise. The teacher was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like I thought I was never going to be able to give breaks like this." But when it really boiled down to it, actually then increased the amount of attention they had from their kids daily.
Yep. And so then another resource we kind of have here is just some game resources. So here we're going to go ahead and talk about Yahtzee. But you can kind of see here there's all these positive different reinforcement ideas and games and tidy up your transitions. So these are all kind of different games that you're able to use within your class, the praise game as well. But Yahtzee is a really fun one. And so again, just like the work and reset, you want to think of just a few behavior goals that you want to set for that class period. And so you can set a timer or you can do the whole class period. So if you are like bell schedule, you could set it that way. Or you could say, okay, for the next 30 minutes or the whole day or whatever you kind of want to do, think about 3 different goals. So again, raise your hand, stay in your seat. Everyone has a pencil. And then what happens after that time is up? Students put their head down. And what they're going to do is they're going to vote. And they're going to vote for if they have met these 3 goals, whatever goals you set, if that they as a class have met those goals. And so again, as a teacher, you're not really participating, you're kind of observing your students and they're self-reflecting. And they're thinking, okay, did we do well raising our hands, or were there students that were speaking out? And so they're either going to raise their hand and say, yeah, we did a great job with that, or they're going to maybe not vote. You can override as a teacher if you needed to. And then what happens is if all the students voted and they were awesome, they maybe did a great job with all 3 of those behavior goals, they then will get to roll. But you're going to kind of reflect first, because this is a great way if you're trying to teach a new behavior for students to self-reflect, think about, okay, did we stay in our seat or did we not? And then you can have that conversation. Well, what could we do better next time? Or what could we do better this time? And so if the students win, they will roll 5 dice, just like in Yahtzee. If you win as the teacher, you can do class versus teacher. You get to roll those 5 dice. And so what the students will do is they can either compete against different classes or they could just compete against you. It's kind of up to you how you want to do that. They're going to roll those 5 dice, and based on what you roll is you're going to play Yahtzee for the whole month of February. Maybe you're going to implement this in February. And so until the game is done, you just keep playing. And then at the end, whoever the class winner is, or whoever the winner is, maybe you do table groups, those students win some type of reward.
And there's tons of additional games. If you go into that positive reinforcement resource, there's tons of additional games, and many of these games are looking at the piece of classroom management, but then you can also take these games and then relate them to other areas of the classroom as well. It could be used in many ways if you modify it. I do believe, did we say, Patrick, did we say 45 minutes or did we say an hour? I don't want to keep anybody more than, I know you guys have tons and tons of things to do. I just want to make sure that we're not, okay. All right. So I think we're at our time frame then. So I want to make sure that we respect everybody's time, and thank you so much for coming. There's tons of resources that we didn't get to go over. Again, we have a podcast, so it comes out every Wednesday. So there's more podcast PD there. If you go onto that link, you will have access, and within the next 24 hours, we'll send out this form, and you will have all of the resources that are linked to it. You're welcome to use or ask us questions on any of those. I know that we didn't have a huge amount of time to be able to go over all of them. So I thank you guys for coming today. And Steph, do you have anything else?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Make sure you fill out that form and we'll send an email within probably the hour once the video processes. And then if you have any questions, you can reach out to us on Twitter. You can also ask right now. I'm going to stop the recording, but feel free to hang out and ask questions, or you can hop off as well.